Good Monday afternoon. It is September 18th, and we're dealing with two named storms out there. First, what was Jose, and for all intensive purposes, this is just a glorified nor'easter now, having that classic comma shape, starting to pull some dry air in as we switch up the imagery to show the water vapor. This is dry air. This is moist air associated with the system there, really getting that dry tongue kind of infiltrating the storm there. And it's also moving over waters that are a little bit cooler. Sea surface temperatures at this point around 78, 79. You need water temperatures of 80 degrees or warmer to kind of sustain tropical development there. So this is becoming a pretty potent nor'easter. Also, once it makes this transition, it's able to maintain its intensity for a longer duration of time as that wind field also spreads out, and likely coastal locations from the mid-Atlantic up to the northeast going to be dealing with some very gusty winds here with tropical storm watches and warnings up all the way up to Cape Cod. All right, here's the numbers on Jose. Hurricane Center still has it as a Category 1, although just barely, with winds of 75 miles per hour, gusts to 90, taking that track off towards the north, and then eventually taking that hook to the east. And a lot of the computer models now indicating that this thing sits and does a clockwise turn very similar to what it did when it was south of Bermuda. There's a reason for that. We're going to talk about the overall atmospheric setup coming up in just a minute. But what are the models thinking? We're looking at the GFS model here. One model with 20 different times it's being run and initiated here. This is called the ensemble forecast. Each line a different run, and pretty good consensus here, taking it to the north. And then as it moves off to the east, what happens next? Yeah, it's pretty uncertain at this point. Could take it anywhere back to the coastline or just sit and meander here for a few days. In fact, a lot of models have it sitting there right up to the beginning of next week, so about a week more time frame. In fact, Jose has been around for 13 days. It just surpassed Irma as the longest-lived named storm of the season. The legacy of Jose is likely going to be the very rough surf and coastal erosion here for several days now. This is the Futurecast model indicating wave heights mainly offshore, but look at these numbers here. We're getting the oranges and yellows, and that's indicating 15, 20-foot waves offshore. As you get closer to the shoreline, 10, 15-foot waves cannot be ruled out as this system just sits and spins there as it turns into a classic nor'easter. All right, I want to dive south now and talk about Maria, because that is going to be the headlines here for the next several days as it charges into the islands like Dominica, Martinique, and especially over to Puerto Rico as we get into the next 24 to 36 hours. We've been able to use here the Meteo France radar site over on Martinique, and this is indicating a clearly defined eye and eye wall there that's been developing, not so evident yet on the satellite imagery here as we show it up on infrared. Maybe in the last image, there you go, the last image, the eye is actually starting to clear on out. We zoom in close, and this is the island of Martinique right here. It's looking like the eye center could possibly even track just south of Dominica and north of Martinique, still remaining over open waters there. Even if it does make landfall on these islands, likely going to lose very little steam. Here's the visible imagery on it. Very symmetrical system here. Very good outflow and very good thunderstorm activity all around that eye center. Hurricane watches, warnings, tropical storm warnings, watches all up for all of these islands here. Even Puerto Rico under that hurricane watch. Now the Virgin Islands have been upgraded to that hurricane warning. Now's a good time to refresh yourself on what a watch and warning means. A watch is a little bit farther out into the future. 48 hours in advance indicates the risk of hazardous weather. A warning, a little more urgent. Shorter time frame to prepare. The event is occurring, imminent, or likely. So keep that in mind if you are in those islands or even up through Puerto Rico and eventually maybe even towards the east coast of the United States. Have to really pay close attention to this. This morning, Maria was a Category 1 hurricane. Now, as of the 11 a.m. advisory, it jumped 2 categories. Rapid intensification underway as it's moving into waters in a similar setup that allowed Irma to get so strong so fast. And likely the strengthening is not done just yet. Really threatening here, main threat to Puerto Rico, takes a beeline towards that as a Category 4, if not stronger, by early Wednesday morning. And then from there, it reemerges back into the open waters, some of the warmest waters in the Atlantic here just north of Turks and Caicos, as it takes more of a northwesterly turn. This is where the forecast period, day 5, gets very uncertain, because in either direction from the center line, that's about 225 miles. So nearly a 500-mile spread on where this could track. So certainly all interest along the southeast coastline, Florida and the Bahamas should pay very close attention to this as we get into the weekend and beyond that. Now, I talked about all the factors that are helping Maria kind of develop, very similar to what Irma had to deal with. And here's the track, the actual storm track of Hurricane Irma, and I overlaid it here with the forecast track for Hurricane Maria. Now, usually if you get hurricanes in the same area. Upwelling becomes an issue, a storm moving through the wake of the other storms. Sea surface temperatures are much cooler usually, but Maria is just far enough south that it's into waters that were undisturbed, so there's a lot of energy here that the storm can use to develop, a lot of heat energy from the ocean, and the warm ocean waters extend to quite a far depth. Look at these numbers here out towards the islands that it's going to be striking in the next couple of hours. Water temperatures in the middle 80s. That's an insurmountable amount of moisture and energy that's available for these storms. Also something here, mid-level moisture. That's the relative humidity or the amount of moisture higher up in the atmosphere. You need those percentages up and over 55%. This is where Maria is currently located, in a very moist environment. So another thing aiding its strengthening. Here's how the GFS ensembles, again, same model, 20 times we're running it, how it sees Maria unfolding. A pretty good consensus towards Puerto Rico, and maybe even if it varies off to the south and west a little bit, could threaten the Dominican Republic and over towards Haiti. Then from there on out, look at the spread here. It gets about 1,000 miles from the farthest west over Cuba to another one that's all the way out to the east, south of Bermuda there. So the spread grows, and we're watching several things to see what happens with that track. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Here's how it looks on Hurricane Maria with the other models. Pretty much the same consensus there, a pretty large spread as we get farther out. All right, two steering scenarios in terms of Maria and what we're looking at. So Jose still going to be a player, and we're going to have to watch how Jose unfolds to see how Maria behaves. Now, if Jose gets stuck under a building ridge in southeastern Canada, it's going to sit and spin, like a lot of the models are indicating, for the next several days, just sitting and spinning in that same area, clockwise turn like it did south of Bermuda last week. This will also weaken the ridge over the Atlantic to help recurve Maria out to sea. So we want Jose to stick around a little bit. The other scenario is if Jose gets out of here in a rather hurry, that means the ridge over the Atlantic stronger and builds south, and that would push Maria closer to the southeastern coast and looping it up possibly right along it. So that would certainly threaten the southeast a little bit more if that setup was to come underway. So we'll have to watch it very, very carefully here and where that ridge sets up. Something else cool I want to talk about here. So far in 2017, we've had 13 name systems. Maria is still up there as well as Jose. But I want to talk about Katia because, you know, about a week and a half ago, Katia died, or so we thought. In fact, the remnants of Katia made landfall in central Mexico. And they meandered, they lost the surface rotation, but the mid-level circulation survived, and then it reemerged over the Pacific Ocean and redeveloped into Hurricane Otis, which made it to a major hurricane just a few short days ago. And this is interesting. This is called a crossover hurricane. It's when the storms retain the same name. But this is an instance where that doesn't really pertain, because if a storm degenerates like Katia did, but its remnants survive into another basin, aka from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean, it will receive two different names. That's the National Hurricane Center policy on that. Pretty interesting stuff there. Katia has two lives, pretty much. All right, that's all I got to say today. We're going to continue to watch Maria and Jose as it pushes north and how the two eventually interact. If you want to join the conversation, have any questions about the storm, feel free to reach out at meteorologist Tim Pandajis on Facebook and on Twitter, 13 Tim Pandajis.